you worked in headquarters planning for D-Day, this is the patch you wore on your shoulder. The black symbolizes Nazi tyranny. The flaming sword is a crusade against that tyranny. Above it is the colors of the Allies, and blue is a better tomorrow. So, and if you look at the layout of the garden, they made it look like the shield. A lot of D-Day veterans took part in designing the memorial. So this is Eisenhower and his staff. So here we've got Bradley, he's American. He's responsible for all American land forces. Ramsey is British. He's responsible for all the naval operations, so he has 5,000 ships under his command. That'll be the largest armada mankind will ever see, because now with nuclear weapons, you wouldn't assemble that many warships together in one location. And if you're familiar with the story of Dunkirk, the rescue of the British soldiers from the French coast, he's the man who came up with that plan. Ted Eyre is British. He's the number 2 man, so if something happens to Eisenhower, he would assume command for the entire operation, which is codename Overlord. It's up on the arch up there. So, very British looking to me. The guy you just mentioned, a lot of people ask about, is General Patton. We knew that Hitler believed he was our best general and would lead the invasion. At that time, he just slapped a soldier and was in the doghouse for that, so it made it easy. Patton's job on D-Day was to be a decoy. We remember there's all that deception work taking place. We put him out at Dover, which is the closest cross to the English Channel. There's all this stuff making think that we're going to be there. And we gave Patton what was called the Ghost Army, basically a bunch of inflatable tanks. When a German reconnaissance plane would fly over, we'd intentionally not shoot them down, take all the pictures you want. And a lot of the people who worked in Hollywood building sets and so forth were in the Ghost Army. So at night they'd move the tanks around and make tread marks in the grass and stuff for the next plane that would fly over, make it look like activity was taking place. And it completely fooled the Germans. It wasn't until about 6 weeks after D-Day where Hitler said, Normandy's not a diversion, it's the real thing. So it kept a lot of troops tied up in the wrong location. So that was Patton's job. For starters, he's just given the green light to the biggest military operation mankind's ever seen. So the weight of the world's got to be on his shoulders. Shortly before this, Eisenhower was told by that gentleman over there that 70% of these guys are going to be killed almost immediately. We need to call off the airborne operation. Eisenhower said it's too critical. We need to proceed with it. So knowing that, thinking that, Eisenhower went to meet these guys face to face, shake their hands, talk to them. That's character. Montgomery, British, he's responsible for all land operations. So Bradley reports to Montgomery. We had our flamboyant general with Patton. The Brits had theirs with Monty. In fact, there was a meeting where the King of England met with Eisenhower, and one of the things he asked was, how you getting along with Monty? And Ike said, pretty good, but I think he wants my job. And the king said, oh good, I thought he wanted mine. Clay Mallory, British. He's responsible for the air operations, so he has 11,000 aircraft under his command. Beadle Smith is the Chief of Staff for Eisenhower. Chief of Staff is the guy who makes things happen for his boss. So Eisenhower says, I need this. He's the guy that makes sure it happens. Interesting career in that he dropped out of high school at 16, joined the military, of course went back to school while in the military, became a 2-star general, Chief of Staff, the most important guy in the world at the time. After the war, he became an ambassador to the Soviet Union, was the first director of the brand new CIA, so not bad for a high school dropout. Yeah. So, and he was really perfect for the job because, you know, he never went to West Point, so he had no long-term friendships or loyalties. So when it came time to do things like tell Patton he's sitting at a desk on D-Day, he had no qualms about doing it. You're going to sit at a desk on D-Day and you'll smile while you do it. You know, that's it. So he was really a perfect man for the job.
So you might wonder why the D-Day Memorial is in Bedford, a very small old town in rural Virginia. Well, Bedford lost the most amount of people by the population of Bedford, like 20 people on D-Day.
You might remember from Pearl Harbor, was the only ship to get underway during the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was repaired and took part on D-Day. The World War I battleship Texas is still around, took part on D-Day. Interesting story with the Texas is that, you know, as our troops pushed further and further inland, the battleships were providing fire support for the troops pushing forward. Well, it got where the Texas couldn't elevate her guns high enough to get the range to continue her fire support mission. So the captain took the ship in closest to the beach as he could, and then he flooded one side of the ship so the guns would elevate higher so he can continue his fire support mission. You know, again, thinking out of the box, you know, it's like along the same lines, thinking out of the box was, you know, there's no natural harbor in the area. So Winston Churchill said, well, let's just build our own. We built 2 Mulberry harbors. Basically, they made a bunch of concrete barges, took a bunch of old ships that they didn't want anymore, towed them over, sank them, and they created 2 artificial harbors with it. That way ships could dock up to those, and then they could move material inland quickly and effectively. It only took about 10 days for them to become operational. So, again, thinking out of the box. You got a problem, what do we do? LST landing ship tank. Crews called them large slow targets. But there's a few of those on D-Day. The first, if you can imagine a floating tank, they had these tanks, they basically put big skirts on and they would propel themselves through the water up onto the beach. The first LST dropped off its tanks at the distance it was supposed to, but remember, because of the rough seas that were taking place and everything, most of the tanks immediately sank. Captain of the second LST saw that. He said, I'm taking my ship right in. And he took it up to the beach. And in fact, one of our volunteers, his dad was in a tank on that second LST. Unfortunately, he was killed 3 weeks later, so he never knew his dad, but those tanks were critical on D-Day. The Coast Guard played a huge role in D-Day also. Most of the landing craft were piloted by the Coast Guard, as well as going up and down the beach, pulling guys out of the water. Merchant Marines, almost all your cargo ships in World War II were manned by Merchant Marines, civilians basically with no government benefits, Merchant Marines. In World War II, 1 out of 26 Merchant Marines was killed in action. So talk about a high-risk job. 1944, we were getting pretty good at shooting down airplanes, sometimes our own. Think about it. In those days, you just had, a silhouette sheet that showed you what German plane outlines look like and American planes. I'm an 18-year-old kid scared out of my mind. Here come some planes. I just may start shooting. So to prevent that, 11,000 aircraft at the last minute, because we didn't want the Germans copying it, got painted with those black and white stripes. And I told everybody that's a friendly, don't shoot at it. And it worked. Little two-seater, pilot in the front, spotter in the back with his map. Because think about it, I'm a German. One of these flies over and sees me. What's going to happen next? The artillery's probably going to start raining down on me. So Germans always hid when these things were around. Flies low and slow, only does 70, 75 miles an hour. The Germans always hid until later, after D-Day. There was a major in Patton's army. He got tired of just observing, so he strapped 6 bazookas to the wings. And he's credited with taking out 4 German tanks, 6 personnel carriers, and an assortment of other things. And that's when the Germans stopped hiding and started shooting at these things when they came out. Some of his pilot buddies he said, okay, I'll give it a try, and the all came back and said, I'll never do that again. The other one is on Omaha Beach in France. Ours is a little bit different, and then when it was being made, a D-Day widow heard about it, and she gave the sculptor her husband's wedding band. And if you look on his ring finger, you'll see the wedding band there. On D-Day, no one met their objectives. We hadn't pushed far enough in that we had hoped for. But the thing is, we had broken through the Atlantic Fortress Wall. We were inside, we had control of the beach, and now we're flooding men and material onto the beach. The Normandy invasion wasn't technically over until later in August, when we finally broke through. What happens as soon as you go inland, the French farmers through the centuries, the outer perimeters of their farm fields, they would let grow with trees and bushes or whatever, so thick that tanks couldn't even push through them. And so it's an excellent defensive position for the Germans. You've got great cover to hide inside. You slowed the advance. The advance we'd hoped for that would be in miles, we ended up doing in feet. Measuring in feet. The Germans, you could defend from these thickets, and then just fall back to the next one, another few hundred yards to the next one, and it just repeats. So about August is when we finally broke through, and so the Normandy invasion was June through August. But you look at all the names on the wall there, and to paraphrase Lincoln at Gettysburg and Reagan at Normandy, is that liberty isn't genetic. Every generation has to work for it. And unfortunately, that generation had a huge challenge, but they rose up, and the world's better off for it now.